Hey! Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or whenever this finds you. I'm your host Chantal Senya, and thank you for joining me on another episode of To Be Confirmed, the latest, hottest podcast series which seeks to answer society's larger questions about race and racism, because often the answer to these questions remain, well, to be confirmed. Tune in, listen, and prepare to be inspired, provoked, and moved as we dive into another episode of To Be Confirmed. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. I am your host, Chantal Senya, and welcome to the first episode of To Be Confirmed. Now, this episode will be split into two parts, just because we want you to really take everything in, understand, critically think about things. For that reason, and of course, we've got Kolechi here. I want you to really take in the double blessing. So for that reason, we're going to have a two-parter. So with that being said, Kelechi Okafor, can we get some round of applause, please? Please let the people know who you are, what you do, what you're about.
I'm Kelechi Okafor, and I guess I'm just a baby girl is how I tend to put it. It's just too long and arduous to go through all the things that I do, but a baby girl suffices.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. For those who don't know about Kelechi Okafor, she is an award-winning writer, activist, social commentator, podcaster. For those who know, say your mind. An actress, mother, a self-declared baby girl, and also a pole dance studio founder. So there is a huge amount of credentials assigned to Kelechi Okafor. Now, as you see above my head, the title of this podcast is called To Be Confirmed. Now, To Be Confirmed is a provocative podcast series which seeks to answer society's biggest questions in regards to the relationship between race and racism, with intersectionality, with identity, with gender, class, and more. Now, the title of today's episode is Black Womxn, Picture, Portrayal, and Playback. Now, what I mean by picture, portrayal, and playback, essentially with picture, we're going to be talking about the image assigned to Black women, whether that be with projected expectations, the role of Black women, for instance, negative stereotypes between, our relationships, our sexuality and gender. When we talk about portrayal, we'll be talking about the misunderstanding of Black women. So through the representation of Black women, whether that be through intergenerational trauma, the role of culture, and the pressure that is placed on Black women to validate masculinity. And finally, playback. So with playback, we're looking at the consequences of society's picture and portrayal of Black women and how that plays out in day-to-day life. So of course, looking at the current Black women in the adaptation post-COVID, and of course, with the social-political context and consequences of colonialism and white supremacy, but most importantly, in the playback, how we can reclaim our Black womanhood. So, in doing so, again, premise of the podcast, the big question that I'm asking today is, in a society that functions on the vehicle of a white supremacist heteropatriarchy and how that manifests in the quality of life, in the navigation of womanhood and relationships, will Black women ever be able to gain and wholly reclaim their right to the ownership of their legacies? So it's a big question, a loaded question, but don't worry, we'll break it down for you. So a couple of things I want to clarify in the space here is that when I talk about women, I'm going to be using Moya Bailey's definition of women. So that will be the spelling of women, but with the X. The reason of that is to include trans people, gender non-conforming people, and also the non-binary people who are often excluded in the conversation of womanhood, but also to dispel Misogynoir, because to remove these people from conversations is Misogynoir in itself. And of course, when self-identification is ignored, that's when oppression can, of course, take form and manifest. Now, of course, and one thing I do want to highlight is, of course, as we are celebrating 50 years of Pride, we do need to honour the woman that is Marsha P. Johnson, that gave us the first brick at Stonewall, as we celebrate this momentous commemoration. So, and including that, Kelechi and I will be talking a lot about intersectionality and other amazing, words and things in regards to today's episode. Now, with intersectionality, this was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. Now, intersectionality essentially looks at the way that different systems of oppression work with one another and how that influences our perspective and understanding of the world around us. So, for instance, looking at race, gender, class, sexuality, and the like, how all of them interlink with each of our individual persons and how that influences us. Now, the reason why I say that is because before we begin today's episode, well, been in here for a while now, but before we begin today's episode, I want to preface that Black women are not a monolith. Okay, so as Kelechi and I, as Black women, are here through cultural synergies, through our identity, through shared Black womanhood in some extent, we are both unique women. Therefore, we have our unique different aspects, identities, and, of course, our own journeys into Black womanhood. So I just wanted to preface that with that as well. So carrying on, of course, a lot of this that we'll be speaking of is going to be prefaced on Black feminism. Of course, with the acknowledgement, we have to acknowledge the women that have been here before us, such as Angela Davis, Kimberly Crenshaw, Patricia Hill-Collins, and Mickey Kendall as well. Now, with intersectional feminism, of course, we're looking at solidarity for all people, for marginalised communities, as white feminism does tend to exclude these people from conversations, which, of course, then endorses a white supremacist heteropatriarchy, which then enforces cultural and social norms. Now, again, with Black feminism, another thing I want to highlight is that with Black women and feminism, the principle is the principle of empowerment, to honour, acknowledge, support and advocate for one another, of course, to ensure that we are dispelling the impact of racism in itself. Now, to carry on with today's episode, I want to look at question number 1. So, how I looked at answering this question was by conducting a survey over my social media platforms. So out of around over 300 people, 22 responded. And I asked 3 questions in relation to today's title. So looking at the picture element of today's episode title, I asked, have you as a Black woman felt forced to conform to societal expectations projected on you? So by that, I meant beauty standards, sexuality, and stereotypes. And finally, is this a regular occurrence? Now, Kelechi, I would like to grab your insight upon looking at the word board over here and what screams out to you.
Well, the first thing we see is what I see anyway, is hair stereotype jumps out at me.
Yeah.
Natural hair as well, inextricably linked, I guess, to Black women.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that legislation literally has to be passed in order for Black people to not be discriminated against at work.
Yeah.
You have to remind people through law to not be discriminatory to Black people because of their hair, specifically Black women. Mm-hmm. And we see this happen often. Mm-hmm. I created a character, Sally, in HR, who's presented as a white woman, who's the head of HR at Plant Acon. And she sees herself as spearheading innovation. And one of the first episodes to ever go viral that I created, or the first skits to go viral that I created, was Sally calling up Morenike and saying, your payslip couldn't be given to you because you keep changing your hair. And so the accounts team can't find you. But you're the only Black person in the company. So why is it an issue that they can't find you because you keep changing your hairstyle? And we find that in numerous working environments, corporate environments especially, the narrative, the constant conversation that Black women tend to find themselves having with their colleagues who are not Black is, your hair's changed again. Yep. Your hair's changed again.
Yeah.
Hair is so politicized for Black people, specifically for Black women, when we consider the beauty standards that we have to navigate
and adhere to.
in a white supremacist society. It is difficult. And if you consider the fact that the reason that people have to assimilate and adhere to certain standards is literally due to survival. Yeah. Because if you did not, you'd be ostracized from whichever group that is that you're trying to be a part of, whether it's for a working thing or just general interpersonal interactions. Yeah. You're likely to be ostracized from those groups. The moment that you're ostracized from those groups, you're more susceptible to danger. Yes. So in order for Black women to not find themselves at the mercy of more danger than they're already kind of exposed to, they would tend to assimilate. But we are seeing that more and more people throughout history have said, actually, no, I'm going to do what I want to do and I'm going to have my hair how I want to have my hair. However, this is going to impact this is going to impact whether you get a job or not. We know that. And we see so many jokes, because when you're looking at society, when you're considering the ills of a society and maybe even its strengths, but in this particular situation, we're looking at the ills of a society, you're likely to know what it is by the jokes that people tell. So the fact that I know many Black women who say, oh, this is my interview here, hairstyle. Once I've got that job, they're going to see the real me. And that is interesting, that there is a dance that we've learned to do over the centuries, over the past few decades, you know, as we've entered into corporate environments, that is specific to noting the, you know, the prejudice that's already befallen you, that you have to deal with, and figuring out a way to use it in your favor, knowing that they're not going to give you that job if your hair's unlike, you know, if it's not straight, bone straight, that sort of thing. So you do that, you get the job, and then you let yourself show. But how much of yourself do you even let show in the workplace? Probably not very much.
Yeah. It's that element of having to, as you say, play a dance, but also having to think tactically, like about how you even, you know, navigate your identity in the workplace, how you assert yourself, how you communicate with your colleagues. And that in itself is, you know, tying into microaggressions, tying into, you know, coming out of social norms, coming out of social, you know, dominance that dictates the way that Black women can, you know, live their lives is completely shocking. And, you know, to carry on this word cloud again, as you say, hair stereotype jumps out significantly in this grid. And in fact, I do want to we will touch on stereotypes a little bit more, actually, because Black feminism, a bit of theory in my research, comes out, and it's again, I'll explain a bit later in terms of the theme, but it was really interesting to see how many recurrences and repeating of certain like buzzwords like stereotype popped out. And again, there's like I said before, there's a synergy that comes with Black womanhood. A couple of quotes I do want to look at in regards to this question here. So one person said, "It's daily, and I find it hard not to engage with it as a menopausal woman. An example is shaving my head. Family protested that women can't have a bald head, and I was in my early 20s. Great to see that it's not judged as much now." Now, another person said that I may actively work to conform to certain beauty standards at times, but may actively work to deviate from the Black female stereotypes in work, as we just mentioned, or in new social situations. I think the way we respond to these pressures is out of survival. Now, a quote that really stood out to me was, "But I never want to conform to these four standards because I have my own standard of beauty that I adhere by," which I think was quite powerful and actually segues really well into the next part of the conversation. So as you've identified, stereotype pops out quite a bit. I counted stereotypes in the survey out of 300 and something, 22 people responded. Stereotype in this question popped up 5 times. Hair popped up 11 times. So half of our respondents said hair was a big thing in here. And finally, Eurocentric and beauty standard, as we see on the screen here, appeared 3 times. Now, again, I think it's best for us to talk about, the societal expectations and the context behind that in terms of Black womanhood, etc. So in terms of, the pervasive nature of racism, and of course how that endorses, the way that Black women are seen and heard, I've used a lot of US Black scholars. So those of us that know what we're talking about, I've used a few US Black scholars. However, the reason why I've done that is because I believe that, again, we can apply this into our social context as people that, as Black British feminists, as Black British women, you can apply the consequences of racism across the diaspora, wherever you identify from, actually. And I think, especially in regards to the person that responded in regards to menopause, I think it's a great way to open that conversation, and was a large part of why I approached this type of methodology in using this. Tying into identity, of course, and how that is often overlooked in Black women, now tying back into stereotypes. Now, Patricia Hill Collins talks about 4 different archetypes of Black women and their stereotypes. One is the Jezebel, that is the hypersexualization of Black women, which we see in fetishization and the like. You have the mule. So again, coming from slavery, the hardworking Black woman that takes it on the chin and that doesn't complain. We have the mammy, so the domesticated Black woman that comes from, again, Black women having to mother the children of slave owners. And then finally, we have the Black lady, which I thought was really interesting, the use of language of Black lady, because again, talking into the way that Black women are presented here, I just thought it was quite significant that to identify lady as a stereotype or as an archetype, a character of a being, to me told me already that even us in this space, the fact that Black women have to sit here and say, no, I am this, I am self-identifying, was quite significant. Now, the Black lady, talks about the career woman, the strong Black woman, for example, which is an extension of this. Now, a large part, and I hope, interject here, a large part of identity as a Black woman, I think, is in taking up space, in making yourself known, and making that noise you need to make, and making people aware of who you are and what you do and the like. And of course, in self-discovery, in self-love, and being self-defined in who you are. Now, following on from that as well, now, negative stereotypes, of course, reinforce the oppression of Black women. I mean, I don't know about you, but have you had any particular experiences on your own that, you can identify straight away as a way that you've been stereotyped, that you've been sexualized, fetishized at all? I mean, I can't speak for you, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's constant. It's constant. The things that you notice and the things that maybe you don't notice so much. I think maybe something that recently comes to mind, I was meant to do something as part of an initiative that was meant to be promoting Black business with a big brand that we all know, one of the largest brands that we know in terms of tech. And they were partnering, and they said that, we're gonna do this, and we want to support Black people. We want to support Black people, and they wanted to feature my pole dance studio.
Oh, wow.
And so they came through, or they sent representatives through to come and take photos.
Yeah.
And I had my big Afro wig on at the time.
Yeah.
And they were like, just move around your space. They were very aware that it was a pole dance studio. So I posed by the pole.
Nice.
The representatives from the tech company sent them a message straight back. No, you can't have that. It's too sexual. So I thought, okay, maybe people have their stigmas about pole dance, and they're not really having the conversations about sexuality and sensuality. That's their problem. They said, okay, unfortunately, we can't use poles in the shot, even though it's a pole dance studio. Fine, we won't use poles in the shot. Let's go to the other room, and where I'll just do general dance bits. And so I did a pose where my leg is just like flung in the air and I'm looking joyful. They sent another message back. No, it's still too sexual. And at this point, the Black people who had been sent as their kind of quota ticking representatives, everyone started to get uncomfortable because they could suddenly realize that it had nothing to do with the pole, but everything to do with my Black womanhood. They even asked that I change one of my outfits because it was, again, too sexual. So I just asked them to go back to whoever was saying that and tell them to shut the hell up.
Good.
Good. And, that campaign, I don't engage with it. I just don't engage with it whatsoever.
Do they still
because
use your...
I think the term has run out, but oftentimes you will find again with these tech people, they'll be like, oh, we're just literally reposting something we've already done. It's not a brand new campaign. And they reached out after that and said, oh, we're doing a round 2. Would you want to be involved? And I just didn't respond to the email. Found out that the person that was responding was a white man who kept saying, oh, that's too sexual, because you, in your mind, you've sexualized, you've hypersexualized Black women, you fetishize Black women. There is a reason that ebony, the ebony category ranks so highly on pornography sites and porn sites because of that reason. There's a reason that the colonization of the continent of Africa was so aggressive because the land represented the woman. It represented the Black woman, and there was this kind of bloodlust in trying to dominate it. Yes. And that's never left white unconsciousness. People are so infatuated, obsessed, preoccupied with the mysticism that they see around Black womanhood, that everybody's trying to emulate it in one way or another, but they will never attest to the fact that that is what they're doing while simultaneously mocking Black women in the process. So when I think about that, and I think about that previous campaign, the fact that everybody noticed straight away what was going on and everybody felt uncomfortable, I thought, well, there you go. That goes to show that, and I will never, ever, ever work with them again based on that whole thing, because you already live in a body that people are sexualizing for you without you even choosing the parameters within which you want to explore yourself and explore your body in whichever fashion. So yeah, I think about that. The angry black woman is another narrative is pushed a lot.
Yes.
And I think that that's really, really interesting when we talk about, I mean, we're going to go to it later on about how do we, in terms of playback, how do we claim all of this?
Yeah.
But touching on anger and claiming anger, I think is something that we're going to go onto
really
later.
important.
Yeah, we have to. But the angry black woman stereotype is the one that I think that a lot of black women run from.
Yes.
And that I think it's very unfortunate.
Yeah.
In this society, like white supremacist heteropatriarchy did not gain this amount of power over centuries from being nice.
Yep.
In fact,
it was violent.
It was violent. It was angry. Yeah. Everybody else who has been dominated, who has been oppressed, everybody's told to move far away from that narrative of anger.
Yes.
Everyone, when they want to talk about protesting, you mentioned Marsha P. Johnson.
Yes.
We're having pride and pride celebrations and we're doing all of these things now. It was a riot.
Yeah.
It was a riot.
Yeah.
It was violent. And it needed to be because nobody
is
going to hand you your liberation. They're just not.
Yeah.
So even that has been almost sanitized in a way and played down and compressed into something else. And it's important to celebrate. Notting Hill Carnival, the same thing.
Yeah.
It was about oppression. It was about people rioting against oppression.
Yes.
And then now we have what we have. So it's great that we can celebrate certain things, but we can't forget the anger that led to those things being necessary in the first place, or the anger that was used because of the just the wild violence that people were already facing. So I think about those stereotypes, and it is something I have to navigate. It's something that when we talk about Eurocentricity, we talk about the centering of white womanhood when we are talking about hair. I think that's also important. And then a caveat that I also want to put in is that white women wear hair extensions. They wear hair extensions all of the time.
Honestly.
They don't blend the thing down.
Not properly.
The hair will be here.
I'm seeing tracks.
Their natural hair will be here.
Yeah.
And they can get away with that. And nobody has those conversations. They leave the end of it is just blunt. Like I walk behind certain white women, I'm like, so you just went out and you're just having no problems.
Yeah.
The color is not matching. Right. But the texture, we're seeing two different realities are taking place on the scalp. But fine. I say all of that to say they rarely get ridiculed for wearing hair extensions.
Honestly.
Because the expectation is that they can grow hair and they can grow long hair. Most times when you speak to quite a few white women, their hair can only go to a certain length. Yet it is black women that the hair length, texture is weaponized against.
Honestly.
Wearing hair extensions is weaponized against. Why?
Yeah, honestly. And the thing is, it's great that you touch upon that because Mickey Kendall, I'm paraphrasing here, but she says in regards to beauty standards that depending on who I'm talking to, my features are either revered to or reviled against. And I think that's really interesting. And when you mentioned, white women in hair and, oh, you're wearing a wig. I'm wearing a wig right now. You're wearing a wig. Oh my gosh, how dare you? It's cultural appropriation. It's not cultural appropriation. Why is a messy bun for a white woman brilliant? Why is a clean curl aesthetic, which is now actually being, I would say, colonized, if I'm being very, very honest with you, is a social dominant thing that is given to white women. But when black women want to take that on and let's say wear bonnets out. I wear bonnets out every now and then.
I love the resurgence of bonnets. I love the resurgence of bonnets. What makes me so joyful right now is seeing young black boys. They look like they're in their late teens, sometimes early teens, and they have these big black bonnets that they're all wearing around at the moment with their sliders and their socks. And it just brings so much joy to my heart because while other people might perceive that and say that it's quote unquote ghetto, I think that there is something about being comfortable in your body and living for comfort and just doing that. And people don't have to understand, I need to protect my hair. This weather, this atmosphere, it's hostile.
Too toxic.
Literally.
It's too toxic.
The pollutants, it's not just in the souls of the citizens. Yeah. I will wear my hair bonnet and no one's going to stop me. Yeah. I didn't wash my hair to now come outside and have it like infiltrated with bad vibes. No. I will wear my hair bonnet. And I just think that I think that is great to see. But then we have Black women, and it's interesting when you mentioned about the archetypes and the Black lady.
Yeah.
We have older Black women, and I think they're the ones that I want to have like more conversations with in terms of generational conversations, because sometimes the people who are very kind of beholden, who enforced the oppression the most, are the people who are the most oppressed by it. Women doing all of the work for sexism. Black people sometimes doing all of the work for white supremacy. And I find that with older Black women. So I think about what's her name, Monique.
I was just literally thinking
when she made that video and she was like, my babies, y'all don't need to be wearing bonnets and track suits and all of these things through the airport. My babies. First of all, I'm not your baby.
I'm not your child.
So don't infantilize me. And I'm going to wear that hair bonnet because you're not the one that's going to come and gel up the hair when it's all over the place after that flight. They're recycling air in that aeroplane. Everything is dry. My hair should join it.
No,
because I want to fulfill respectability politics. Honestly. So you look at all of the ways that I think about the fact that prior to cutting my hair off around 2018, I would always have a big Afro wig. And so many people would tell me that I'm beautiful. So many people, it was the look, it was a vibe, it fit into Black. You know, they loved it. And then I shaved my hair, and it was like, oh. You look different. You remind me of Grace Jones. We don't look anything alike. I don't remind you of Grace Jones. Then I started growing my locks. Then it was like, oh, you remind me of Whoopi Goldberg. So in your life, you know 3 Black women, honestly, including Janet Jackson, and you've run out. The roster is done. Can't I just look like me? Why do I need to look like all of those people? Honestly. But I find that when I do events and they ask me to send my headshot, my agent or my manager, one of them will send over my headshot. By the time I get to the event, they've used a picture of me from way back where I've got the bigger hair. And it's just like, oh no, because I just liked it. There's just something about you there that's just really captivating.
Wow.
Yeah, the cap on my head that's covered in hair. That's what's captivating. Don't change my things. But every time you're basically reminded of the beauty standards that people want you to fulfill 100%. As a Black woman, and it's your duty, your responsibility, whether you want it to be or not, to kind of say either push back or, you know, go with it.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even so, in regards to Whoopi Goldberg, as you mentioned, that there's been so many times when I've had braids, when I've had twists of, I used to wear different colors. I used to wear like electric blue, electric purple, red. The amount of times I've been called Whoopi Goldberg.
Tracy Chapman, did you get Tracy Chapman?
Yes, Tracy Chapman, Whoopi Goldberg. I got Predator.
Wow. Wow.
No.
Not you starring in Alien.
I got Predator. Like that was a lot. That was a hard one to digest, actually, but I got through it. I pushed through and had to say respectfully, this is my hair. So you can either suck a dick or suck it. But but even so, the things that you've shared as well, actually, it ties into Misogynoir, which I want to really talk about, because you can't talk about Black women without mentioning Misogynoir. For those who don't know, Misogynoir was a term coined by Dr. Moya Bailey. You'll be hearing a lot about her today, in 2008, which again, essentially in simple terms, looks at the racism and sexist violence that Black women specifically, and I stress, specifically face.
Well, don't forget, Misogynoir Blanc is now a term.
Sorry?
Yeah.
We're moving on. We're going to move on from that one. Misogynoir Blanc.
They got online and they said that what white women are now experiencing by being asked to be accountable for certain violences is now Misogynoir Blanc, if we want to do Misogynoir.
Can we please ask why white women feel the need to always take away from Black sentiment, please, especially with Black feminism? The fact that, going on to feminism during, slavery, the fact that white women, when they, in 19th century feminism, they dominated the feminist discourse whilst ignoring the Black women that were enslaved in the first place, without taking contribution from them in the first place, yet equating slavery to their conditions, which were privileged. It's not clicking, it's not clocking, it's not checking out.
Hyperbole.
So Misogynoir Blanc.
But you have misogyny. You literally, that's my point. When we talk about anthropological terms, and we talk about etymology and things like that, and we look at etymological kind of evolutions, how words change. You literally have misogyny.
Yes.
That's why Misogynoir was over there. Don't now create Misogyny Blanc, because what then happens to misogyny?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a lack of, it's a willful lack of understanding.
100%, 100%. I feel like it's 2022 now, you know, information is so easily accessed and shared. People can actually use sense nowadays, and they just choose to not use it. And it's really frustrating. Again, this conversation is frustrating to hear that, you know, it was my first time hearing Misogyny Blanc in the first time. So anyways, we're going to move on from that.
But Moya Bailey, who has sense.
On it, Moya Bailey. We're going to focus on Moya Bailey. So again, just to clarify for the space, we're going to take away Misogyny Blanc, cleanse the space from that. Misogynoir, again, by Dr. Moya Bailey, coined in 2008, looks at, again, the violent and pervasive nature of racism and sexism as an intersect together against Black women specifically. And again, one thing that Dr. Moya Bailey does mention, and I do want to actually caveat here, is that, again, when we talk about misogynoir, we are also including trans and queer Black women as well in this space, because, again, to, you know, avoid them, to not appreciate them is, again, another form of
another violence. Another violence. And you think about the fact that trans women are killed at an exponential rate, but because of misogynoir, it's not, it's because of misogynoir, because of, you know, queer phobia and all of these things, like it's just not acknowledged.
It's not.
And it's really scary, just the number of people.
Honestly. But yeah, carrying on from that, again, as we've already just discussed, misogynoir is an extension of a systemic issue. And with misogynoir, what happens a lot of the time, and we've actually touched on this already, is that when it comes to Black women that face misogynoir, they are often blamed for the misogynoir that they face. And a really popular example I want to use is Megan Thee Stallion, especially in regards to when Tory Lanez shot her. I want to reiterate for the people in the room, Tory Lanez shot Megan Thee Stallion. No ifs, ands, buts, no DJ Cadamis. He shot her. When she expressed her trauma and the impact of her trauma, I'm sure you saw it on social media. It was an absolute windfall.
You know what
abuse.
I love about, I just love social media for the, and by love I mean loathe, social media for this ability of people to suddenly become whichever profession that they want to be that
Honestly.
week. So they watched Megan Thee Stallion talking with Gayle King, I believe.
Yeah.
And suddenly everybody became a behavioral scientist.
Yeah.
Suddenly it was like, oh no, because if you experience true trauma, you wouldn't cry like that.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't do this and you wouldn't do that. What do you know?
Yeah.
What do you know there?
Yeah.
What have you brushed your teeth today? What? There are so many things you have not done in your life. But did you wash your legs?
Respectfully.
You did, and all the things that you are required to do, you have not done. You have not washed your bum. You have not, all the things that's required for you to take part in the society, you have not done.
Yeah.
But you are watching Megan talking about her trauma, her very real trauma that we can all, a lot of Black women can identify with.
Yeah.
And all you're saying is, oh, well, no, you see, because the tears didn't come out of both eyes.
Yeah.
So I'm not buying it, or she's just not emotional enough for me. But the thing is, if she was more emotional than that, you will then say that, oh, it's too much. She's too emotional. Yeah. I can't listen to what she's saying. I can't focus when people are, you know, speaking in that way. So you can't win for losing.
No, honestly, it's that element of selective empathy where when you look at a white woman, the minute you see tears, oh my God, how can I help? Let me gather nations upon to draw and support you. Liam Neeson, another one, in regards to he mentioned
his friend.
His friend girlfriend got raped, and then he set out to kill a Black man.
Any Black man,
and the conversation around that was, well, it's justified. If it was no, that's not what we're going to talk about here. That's what? But if it was reversed and a Black man were to say that, you'd be on his neck on it. If it was a Black woman saying, I was looking for any white man to kill, you'd be jumping on her neck, calling her a murderer. In fact, you would stop her by any means necessary to do that.
About something hypothetical, because she would not have done it.
Yeah.
She was hypothesizing that I might do this, or I would have done this thing, and she would be like 6 floors underneath that jail.
Honestly.
But Liam Neeson could just tell the world that, you know what, this happened to my friend, or however they were related.
Yeah.
And you know what, I wandered the streets. He said, I wandered.
Yeah.
So he set the
shocking.
intention in motion.
It was shocking.
I wandered the streets, was it of Dublin or Belfast? One of
Yeah.
them. He was like, I was wandering them streets, one of them streets in Ireland.
Yeah.
And I was looking for any black man to make pay for that, to kill for what happened to her. So that black man could have just been going about his business, wandering through, going to get a Guinness, something, just minding his black business, and then you would have potentially killed him. So thank God you didn't run into any black men that day, because you actually went out of the house to go and find someone.
You went to lynch, looking to lynch.
And you said at the very beginning of this conversation that black women are not a monolith, but black people are not a monolith. So why am I being made to pay for somebody else's crime that I did not commit? Because the first thing a white person will say to you about racism or the transatlantic slave trade or colonialism is that, well, I didn't do it. Why is it?
My ancestors did.
My ancestors did, and I think it's shameful, but why am I being held to account for it? But Liam Neeson can say that somebody sexually assaulted this woman, and anybody else could have paid for it, because all black people are one.
Yeah, and even so, like the gall to say that, and I think it was a few years
ago
he said white privilege in manifestation, and the name that popped into my head was Ahmaud Arbery.
Yes,
the story of the black man that was jogging, and there is footage of this. Please don't look it up. There's footage of this. I forgot who they were, his murderers are, but
ex-police officers.
They were ex-police officers.
Yeah, a couple of them were, and they were in the back of the truck.
Yes, so there was footage of him, chasing them, lynching him. I believe it was this week that they were sentenced to life imprisonment, actually, finally. But again, to talk about that so freely when that already is a systemic problem already in regards to black lives and the violence that is exerted on them, again, we could digress. But to send the conversation back to Misogynoir and how that plays out as an extension of trauma, of racism and sexism in itself, and back on, behavioral therapists, if you will. Again, another thing that I do want to highlight actually is that I think for me the misogynistic gaze, the misogynoirist, is that a word?
I use it.
Misogynoirist. It sounds quite nice. The misogynoirist gaze I think quite baffles me, because the assumption that women live their lives for the complete attention and adoration of men will always never cease to amaze me.
But that's how a heteropatriarchal society, a white supremacist, specifically heteropatriarchal society functions. Yeah. There needs to be the belief that everything that these people are doing, these groups of people that they're doing, is for your benefit. Yeah. Because if it's not, then what is their purpose? What is their function for staying? Yeah. And so we as women have actually performed that again out of survival. It was a survival technique to just go along with it, all of this is for you. But actually, when women dress up, when they do this, when they do that, most times they're doing it for other women, because that's the only person that's going to likely to understand what effort went into doing what you've, the artifice that you've now created. They would understand what it is. But you've got to kind of, it's for you. Sure, you don't have a clue what any of this is about, but sure, if it means my survival, go for it. Honestly. And I think that, it's something I experience even with pole dance. I couldn't possibly be doing pole dancing because I actually enjoy it as an aerial discipline that helps me to build an incredible amount of strength. No, I must be doing it because I want some man to be like, oh, wow, that is so sexy. And so then when I have my son strapped to me and I'm doing it, I'm going around the pole, it's like, how dare you have your son and you're doing that thing, because you can't comfortably enjoy it now that a baby's in it. But that's also reminding you that it was never for you in the first place. But with Megan Thee Stallion, I think that what people fail to, again, appreciate, like you said, because of Misogynoir, is the fact that we have this thing where somebody assaults you or abuses you, who is a part of your community in one way or another. Your first instinct is to protect them because you know the violence waiting for them from the state.
She said that.
Exactly.
She said that.
But they didn't hear it. They chose not to hear it. The fact that if she had called the police in that moment, because she didn't call the police, but if she'd called the police in that moment, he wouldn't, all of them would have been shot. First, everybody in that situation, everybody's going down. But even if she survived, a black man, you said a black man had a gun? Okay, because even when black men don't have guns, they're still, they're murdered. So I think about the fact that even with a bullet splintered in her foot, she still took the time, as a lot of Black women do, to consider how this will affect the person who's caused her this harm.
Yeah.
And that is a space that I want us to be liberated from.
Yeah. I completely agree. And continuing the conversation of Misogynoir, a thing that I really want to touch briefly on actually is on colorism. And colorism is one thing that I think significantly affects Black womanhood, especially in, you know, how we present ourselves, how we nurture ourselves, how we present ourselves to, again, I guess, fulfill societal expectations of us, whatever. But for those who don't know, colorism is a practice of discrimination based on skin tone. In regards to Black women, the Black community, it can be applied to those who are Asian, minority ethnic. But again, colorism is another form, well, I would say is a form of white supremacy, in the fact that it's reinforcing the fact that the lighter your skin tone is, the more privilege you have. Definitely. And therefore the lighter your skin is, the more beautiful you are. And a really good example that popped up into my mind was, I don't know if you saw or know the song Paying Black Girls by Annie, and there was a session with Georgia Smith and Annie. They did like a joint session together. Despite it being any song, the comments that were coming in were, "Wow, Georgia Smith." Don't get me wrong, Georgia Smith is a beautiful, beautiful woman. But the first was that.
I'm sorry. No, it's just a lie. It's just a lie. Continue. No, sorry. I'm here.
Wow. Wow. You know, carrying on from that, you know, the first comments that came in were not Annie's accomplishments. They were, Georgia Smith is fair. Oh my God, this, that, and the other. And they completely discredited Annie, I don't even doubt the amount of hours, the energy, the time put into that piece of work. Completely shocking. And tying into that, you know, I've seen in figures that I've grown up around, you know, bleaching as a form of trying to combat that level of colorism and misogynoir. And for those who don't know, bleaching can actually hold significant health effects, you know, such as liver failure, mercury poisoning, and even so, you know, but then on the other hand, and we've mentioned this already in terms of, you know, confidence around hair and looking after ourselves, is there's a new wave of reclaiming and undoing these body standards, you know, the bonnet, for instance. And I think with that I guess shows us and tells us that with having that level of confidence and support within that community, and again, that needs to be built. It's something that's going to take time. We can really start to, I guess, dishevel and break apart at this structure that's held us bound for so long, you know? So yeah, but that's what I wanted to sort of like tie in, and tying on to, I guess, continuing on from what we see on the board here.
Because if we go back to what we're talking about colorism, I think within colorism, we're dealing with texturism, we're also dealing with featureism, in that the closer you look to what are considered Eurocentric features, your hair, maybe looser curls, your skin, a lighter shade, your nose, everything. Your lips thinner, your nose thinner. All of these things are likely to mean that somebody would consider you beautiful. And the further you are away from those things, the more likely it is that you'll not be considered beautiful. And beauty is a currency in our society because the body is commodified.
It is.
And so if you do not have that currency, how do you navigate this society successfully and safely? Because if you don't look beautiful as society deems it, you're more susceptible to danger. You're more susceptible, literally, to abuse. You're more susceptible to harsher sentences were you to commit a crime. You're more likely to be convicted of a crime if you don't look like this. So when people talk about pretty privilege, they talk about it and they dismiss it in such a way that doesn't allow for people to understand that literally people are dying, people are being killed, they're not having accommodation, they're experiencing homelessness, they're not having good access to education simply because they don't look a particular way. And what is that way? They don't look as close as possible to what it is to be a white woman.
To whiteness,
And so to me, that is a problem. And to clarify, even on the Georgia Smith thing, I have no personal problem really with Georgia Smith. My problem is with a society that tells me that her talent surpasses other people's talent. She's talented, let her have that. But it surpasses other people's talent purely because of how she looks. And again, it's not really about her features. It's about her color, because there are darker women who have similar features who are not revered in the same way. And so I've said it on my podcast and I'll say it again. I would like to see what the Billboard charts, all of these charts would look like if you could not see what that person looks like. If you just had to base your taste of music on simply what you hear and not what you're seeing, I'm sorry, half of the women, that's really generous, 95% of the women who are currently in the music industry would be gone. Because I look at them and, you know, they say if you've got nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. So I tend to just not say anything at all. But the talent is lacking. It is lacking. Yet they are making, you know, money and they're everywhere. People don't even want to go there, but I'm going to go there. Chicken shop date. I don't know her personally. Again, I have no personal qualms with her, but I just think it's interesting that if we're talking about Black womanhood, if we're talking about all of this, would I, as a Black woman, be able to have a show in a chicken shop where I'm interviewing other Black people about their music or, like, you know, pop culture? No, because what would that infer about stereotypes?
Literally, chicken. Oh wow.
That of course you love chicken. Of course you love that. But that is, to me, the one of the ways to consider and to explore white supremacist heteropatriarchy. That a blonde, slim, white woman who gives us this mediocre, very monosyllabic, monotone sort of delivery is allowed such praise and such access. It's the access that she has. If I wanted to interview similar men on my podcast, would I have access to them?
It'd be 3 different extra steps that you had to take.
It's because that is not her natural environment. The exoticism of it is that it's not her natural environment to be in a chicken shop and to be in such close proximity to Black men. And her blondness and her whiteness makes it something that is therefore attractive, that is therefore something that they should chase. And of course, then the numbers then come up to support it. So then they'll say, no, it's not because of how she looks. It's because her show is popular. How did her show become popular? So everything becomes intertwined. And everything I think that we talk about Black womanhood, we talk about the things that Black women have to navigate, but they wouldn't have to navigate these things if literally the construct of white womanhood that some white women actually do have to get access to, they don't naturally have it. They have to get access to as well. The construct of white womanhood means that everybody else has to operate around that, even white women. But it's easier for them to deviate from that than it is for anybody else.
No, honestly, so, like, poignant, just hitting all the notes there, But I want to carry on this conversation and just sort of nearly, I guess, wrap this up a little bit. And I want to talk about, in regards to the picture of Black women. I want to talk about the adultification of Black girls, of Black women, in fact. And a study that was done, it's called Girlhood Interrupted, conducted by Rebecca Epstein, Jamila Blake, and Talia Gonzalez. What they did was they got 325 adults together, and they essentially studied the behavior of Black girls, and I guess assessed how they perceived Black girls. So in that, reference from Mickey Kendall's book, Hood Feminism, the study showed that all 325 adults that participated in this study found that Black girls of the same age, in comparison to white girls, so they had white girls together, Black girls of the same age were perceived as older than white girls. Additionally, they also assessed that they perceived Black girls as being having a less of a need for nurturing, protection, support, which should be afforded to you regardless of your skin tone or identity, etc. And finally, 72% of the adults, of the 325, were white, of which 62% white women, which is actually quite ironic. 62% who are white women saw Black girls as more sexually aware and mature. Now, I know that you have a lot to say about this. I have a lot to say about this part 2, but I really want to touch on Child Q. I want to touch on Child Q. For those who don't know, you should know by now, the story of Child Q. Unfortunately, a 14-year-old girl was taking her exams at school, and her teachers made the racist assumption, because she was wearing locks, that she smelled like cannabis. So what they did was they called the police over, but they didn't get a guardian. They didn't notify the parents of what was going on. What they did was they conducted a strip search on this young girl whilst she was menstruating. So she had to take off her undergarment and expose herself to adult officers, okay, in this context, which I think is absolutely shocking in this instance. Now, this caused a ripple across social media, including in holding the institution that are the Metropolitan Police, but I will touch on them later in regards to how they treat Black women. And more so, again, you know what? I'm not going to carry on. I want to get your thoughts on this.
What year did it happen?
It was 2020.
Interesting.
2020.
During lockdown.
Yeah.
So in the midst of a pandemic,
yeah,
you had time for racism.
Yeah.
You had time for misogynoir.
Yes.
Against a 14-year-old girl, you had time.
Yeah.
People are dying, Kim. No, like literally, people were dying. And you had time to treat that girl in that way. And what's sad about it is that there are, from what I've been reading recently, there are at least 50 other cases.
I was about to say.
Extremely similar. Young Black girls, boys. So, but the girls, oh.
It's shocking.
And we talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. It's there. Racism is trauma, constant trauma that you cannot escape. Every day you leave your house, you're trying to navigate what level of trauma am I going to experience today? And then what do I do with it once the day is over? And it's not I guess it's just not talked about enough.
No.
But I think about the child Q situation, and not even to make it extremely graphic, but I think it's important. She was sitting her exams. You removed her from the exams, took her into a room. The teacher, even if you didn't have like her guardian or whatever, where were the safeguarding things, the safeguarding framework that you were meant to use in that situation? Because you didn't consider her to be a child.
No.
Right? And so she goes into the room. The teacher stays outside of the room. The two police officers ask her to take off her clothes and take off her undergarments, like including her sanitary pad, and then bend forward and cough.
It's disgusting.
If I put that much effort into allegedly holding this cannabis, which she had nothing whatsoever, if I put that much effort into, can I not have my cannabis? If I've gone to the extent of shoving it, why? I might as well. Do you want it? What do you want it for?
Yeah.
But it's the fact that everything that they're doing actually surpasses logic. It does. It's not logical at all. It was only ever meant to be violent. And the worst part of that for me, as somebody who's observing what happened, is the fact that they returned her to her exams. Oh. And I think that kind of really kind of held in for me, or held together for me, the sheer level of the violence that racism will do that.
Yes.
White supremacy specifically will do that.
Yes.
You'll suffer an unimaginable trauma and they'll go back and operate within everybody else. And then when you're not operating in the same way as everybody else, they'll blame you for that. And it's what you said earlier about being blamed for the oppression, for the violence that's inflicted upon you.
Yes.
You're blamed for it.
Yes.
And so she then had to tell her mum what happened. And ever since then, from the things that I've read and the documents that I've read, she's suffering extreme trauma from that and depression from the whole thing. And what people, I think somebody got fired here and there, but to me, firing is not enough. And yes, I talk about abolishing prisons, but while the prisons are in existence, I need more people to get into them that are committing crimes such as these.
Yes.
But child Q is not a sole occurrence.
No.
And also I was speaking to Ebenita Iyere. She has milk honeybees. And she she works in close relationship with young Black girls. And so they held a forum where they invited the police to come through to their offices in Brixton, so these young Black girls could tell them how they felt about the child Q situation.
Wow.
And you could see these one Black police officer, biracial police officer specifically, he was so uncomfortable hearing these Black girls speaking. He was so uncomfortable, and they got on him, and they got onto it, and I was really, really glad about that.
Good.
But Ebenita was very specific in saying that it shouldn't just be the child Q discussed in terms of adultification, because he said it's not so much that they are adultified in that they're not even humanized. And but everything, to me personally, in my perspective, is all linked. It's all linked.
It's all linked.
And yeah, when people are considering black girls to be older, it's because they're not allowed to have the childhood that white children have.
Yeah.
And that is why they will appear to you to be older
100%.
because you already know that in your mind, in your consciousness or unconsciousness, you're already denying them everything that you would usually give to a white child.
100%, 110%. You've literally you've carried on every single point that I wanted to even raise here. And even so, I believe the concluding report that the Metropolitan Police issued themselves actually cited racism as a possible factor. It wasn't possible, it was.
But even for them to put it in that report, that's when you knew it was bad.
Significant.
Because they will dance around that every single time.
All the time.
For the fact that they had to put it in just lets you know how bad it was, how glaring the racism was, that even they could not deny it and they had to put possibly.
Yeah.
Because usually they won't say anything.
Honestly. But anyways, carrying on, I do want to wish Child Q all the healing, love, positivity, all her family. I hope that you're doing well. I hope you're doing okay. The Met Police, I'll come back for you in a minute. Yeah. Now, this, again, tying on to the emotional distress that Child Q went through, and again, looking into, again, the board here in terms of, how for standard less attention, the feelings that can conjure. As a black woman, I want to talk very briefly actually about the emotional labor of being a black woman. So in that, what I mean by that is in understanding and navigating the social political context as it is, like you said, in understanding and having to deal with racism. You wake up, you leave your house, having to think about, okay, what interaction may I have today? The way I present myself, what do I have to possibly prepare myself for? And I think in being a black woman and the trauma that can come alongside with it, whether that is healed or unhealed trauma, the emotional labor, I feel anyways, is in preserving yourself and preserving the space that you can to actually unpack that trauma, to deal with that trauma, and to, of course, move through that. And we've both touched on this before, but the fact that black women, black children, black girls are seen as expected victims, the fact that there is not enough action, unless we're jumping down people's throats, unless we're spamming comments, unless we're shouting on the rooftop, shouting in this room here, black women aren't given the same attention, black women aren't given the same
R. Kelly,
capacity.
Tim Westwood.
Don't get me started.
Grandpa, baby. I said your name.
BBC. BBC.
Wow.
Anyways, so I kind of wanted to get, again, your thoughts on, again, the emotional labor and understanding that and navigating that feeling and navigating how, again, looking at the picture that is presented of black women, how that does play into how we're seen.
I think that when we're having these conversations about the emotional labor, again, we have to remember that, I'm very big on the esoteric, I'm very big on the metaphysical. So that includes astrology, includes tarot, it includes Yoruba cosmology.
Yes.
I'm very big on that. So I say that as a precursor because I feel like we're spirits, we're spiritual beings in human bodies, right? Yes. In these bodies. That doesn't, just because we're these expansive, divine, spiritual beings, doesn't take away from the fact that the bodies that we're in we're having very, very real reactions to our environment. So I say that because if you consider stress and what stress does to your cortisol levels.
Yes.
And how they talk about cellular mutation and how you can pass on trauma literally through your cells. And we think about colonialism, we think about the transatlantic slave trade, we think about the womb not of a black person specifically in this situation, because not all people who have wombs necessarily identify as women. And how that was colonized, villainized and brutalized. Yes. All of these things happened and we carry that. And so to me, it is no surprise when we talk about fibroids, who gets affected by fibroids solely? What demographic?
Black women.
There we
Black
go.
Women.
And therefore funding isn't put into research to find out why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see? So it seems like we're talking about one thing in terms of emotional labor, but I'm thinking about how the emotional labor impacts our physical bodies, and then our cells change and as a result of that, and that either carries on intergenerationally or it's something that we're dealing with specifically, and then so you're worrying about high blood pressure, all of these things. us being overrepresented within the mental health institutions.
Yes.
And that's for a myriad reasons. But let's just say that in this particular situation, we're looking at the emotional labor.
Yeah.
We don't in our communities talk enough about depression,
We don't.
Anxiety, all of those things, because it's like, oh, take it up with God.
Yeah.
God told me to take it up with a therapist. Now what?
Yeah.
You know, and do we have access?
Yeah.
Because then we have to think about class.
Yes.
Do we have access?
Mental disparities, the like. Yeah.
Access to all of these things.
Yeah.
Do we have it?
Yeah.
So emotional labor seems like it's one isolated thing, but it's not. As with everything is linked.
Yeah.
And so I, you know, for what I qualified as a personal trainer in 2013.
Nice.
And
sort me out, please.
And that feels like a lifetime ago now, because I still use all of the knowledge and I can continue to gain knowledge all of the time.
Yeah.
But when I was looking at just because you study a lot of like anatomy and physiology and all of those things, and I looked at the Black clients I had in comparison to the non-Black clients that I had, specifically the white clients that I had. And you just saw that there were so many different obstacles that a Black client would have to navigate in order to just get the results that they might want. Similar results, but they're navigating it in a different way. And because of the overwhelming whiteness of the wellness industry, because they don't want to call it fitness industry now, they call it wellness industry, because of the overwhelming whiteness of it, instead of identifying something and linking it to what it is, white supremacist heteropatriarchy, they'll say to you, no, you see, because Black people, the thing with you is that you like palm oil. Yeah. So if you took palm oil out of your food, then you wouldn't. First, you want me to make the efforiro with, you want me to make that spinach stew with olive oil. Yeah. Please. There are things that I use olive oil for because olive oil bangs, but it doesn't make sense in this situation.
Yes.
But you know, they'll say things like that, and then they'll tell you palm oil is bad for the environment. Go and talk to your corporations, and that are destroying the rain, all of these forests. Go and talk to them, because it's not me and my little jar of palm oil that's the problem. It isn't. And these can be sustainably sourced. You need to take up your issues with the rampant violence that the corporations are causing, but people don't have those nuanced conversations. So I bring that up when we're talking about emotional labor, because we absorb so much. I find it ludicrous that I can be on social media, could be on Twitter, and 1 minute I've laughed at a TikTok. Literally the next time I scroll up, I'm seeing a Black person being killed. No other community of people, no other demographic of people are subjected to that.
No, it's desensitizing.
I do not, exactly. And to me, I think it's intentional. Of course, we talk about the fact that we do need to see these things to raise awareness, but you need to ask yourself, how the hell do we live in a society where you need to physically see that death happening for you to believe, or that violence happening for you to believe it? I don't believe that you needed to see it. I believe that you wanted to see it because of the generations of like the way that your cells have mutated to where you enjoy seeing that. You like seeing the moment that life leaves a Black person's body. You like seeing the panic. You like to see the way that the pitch changes in their voice as they become anxious and like traumatized from that situation. Because I couldn't watch that for anybody.
No,
I couldn't.
Neither. Even George Floyd, like the video is etched in my mind. That was reshared billions and billions of times. I even had I was told by children themselves that they'd seen George Floyd's last moments.
And so then what happens to that generation of children going forward? Like 20 years from now, when we check in on them, they had to see that on live TV. Have we seen white men being killed in that way?
No.
White women being, have we seen that? No. But the news stations, they all had it on. And then when we come back again to emotional labor, who then are the groups of people that had to hold space for everybody while they were processing that? Black women. People, and then they'll be like, oh no, Black women will save us. You lot went and voted for Trump. 53% of you white women went and voted for Trump. And then when the things blew up in your face, then it was like, oh no, Black women will save us. So it's like, we will enact the violence that is within us that we've been socialized to do. Yes. And then when we see the very real implications, the very real consequences of what we've done, we will now take the emotional task to the Black women and ask them to transmute that for us for the rest of society.
100%. Thank you for listening to part 1 of episode 1, Black Women, Picture, Portrayal and Playback, from To Be Confirmed. Please share, like, comment and subscribe, and part 2 will be coming to you very, very soon at a date to be confirmed.